Anybody in chambers have a question or comment on issues that are not on the agenda? Nope. Anybody online?
There are still no hands raised.
Okay, well, we'll bring it back for public hearing items. So it looks like recommend the city council finds a 5-year capital improvement program, CIP, for fiscal years 2025-26 is consistent with the general plan, area plan, master plan, specific plan, coastal plan, traffic calming plan, and move Monterey multimodal plan. And Matthew, are you going to give us a presentation?
I am.
Thank you.
I will share my screen. Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Buggart, and I'm a senior associate planner with the City of Monterey's Planning Division. And today we're here to talk about the 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal year 2025 to 26 at today's Planning Commission meeting.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just want to let the record show that Commissioner Latassa has entered the meeting and will be able to participate in this item since we are just beginning the presentation. That's all.
And the 5-year CIP program for this fiscal year is an update to the 2024-25 CIP list. This year, there are 99 CIP projects included in the 5-year CIP program, and Exhibit A includes the entire list of projects. There's also an attachment to Exhibit A that includes specific streets associated with one of the CIP projects with the Public Works Department. The reason that we're here today is to assess the consistency of these projects with adopted plans for the City of Monterey, including our general plan, specific plans, master plans, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, Move Monterey, coastal plans, and traffic calming plans. This is not necessarily a review of the projects themselves as much as it is trying to find any that may be inconsistent with those plans. And staff found there to not be any inconsistencies with the adopted plans for improvement of public facilities. These projects were reviewed for the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and the projects fell under one of 4 main brackets. 28 of the projects were found to not technically be a project as defined under CEQA. 57 of the projects were found to be exempt from CEQA, and those are primarily for existing facilities, replacement or reconstruction of facilities, and information collection. Some of the projects were just to go out and gather more information. And 11 of the projects were found to be needing additional review in the future. So prior to conducting the work, it either includes significant excavation or some other feature. And then 3 projects already have adopted, finalized ISMNDs that the projects would continue to be consistent with. And to go into a little bit more detail of the CEQA exemptions, existing facilities, these are for any repairs, for instance, at the recreation center, and replacement or reconstruction of features. There are certain areas where there may be a bathroom that needs to be reconstructed, and it's not necessarily a new project, other than just that reconstruction, or information collection, for instance, traffic collision data, or any of the other items that are considered information collection as part of that Exhibit A. There were 11 that needed additional CEQA review. Some of these were included on last year's fiscal year, and some of them are not. The first 6 or so were included on last year's, and then when we get down to the SSMP update and biennial audit, it was not included last year. It will be included this year. And the Monterey Conference Center cooling towers are also a new project this year. And then the 5-year streets list, the very last item on this list, specific streets are called out and are included as attachment 1 to that Exhibit A. 3 of the projects have an adopted initial study that's been previously approved. Each of these were also included on last year's, and there is no update at this time to those projects. Staff found the projects all consistent, and the recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending to the City Council that the 5-year CIP program list for fiscal year 2025 to 26 is consistent with each of the adopted plans. That concludes staff's presentation. Andrew from Public Works is also on the line for any questions about specific projects that may come up.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew?
Matthew, could you once again define the capital improvement program by comparison to the old neighborhood improvement program? And isn't there a third category of capital expenses for the city that isn't CIP? Isn't there a hierarchy? Because some of these projects, my point is that you see some of these projects get repeated and repeated and repeated, and where's the money and what happens when there's no construction?
Yeah, I think I can provide some input on that, and then I will probably kick it over to our city engineer who's on the line, who will be able to provide some additional input. But I think generally, I think what you're referring to is you're probably used to also seeing a similar list come before this commission. That's for our NCIP, which replaced the NIP program. So that's our a separate funding source. So that list, that list of projects is established through a different vehicle, and that's a committee. Whereas our public works department and ultimately our council will adopt our 5-year CIP program. So it's more of a infrastructure based through our public works department. So there are different funding sources, and obviously the NCIP is funded through our NCIP program, which is a contribution to our TOT taxes. But I will give Andrew Easterling an opportunity to provide some input into perhaps if there's a third bucket their projects go into as well.
Sure. I'd be happy to answer the question. Unfortunately, I don't think it came through on the call. Could you check your microphone to see if it's on? Because I couldn't hear it on my end.
Okay. Do something.
I think it's
I can hear you now. Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
So the question was, we've reviewed a number of these lists in the last 6 months, and just to go over the difference between the CIP and the old NIP, now the NCIP. And the reason is that some of these projects there seems to be some overlap. Like I can pick out maybe 2 or 3 here that I swear I saw on the NIP or the NCIP list. So maybe talk about it a little bit.
Sure. So there sometimes is some overlap if there's different funding mechanisms, like with road maintenance, if something's funded out of Measure PS versus SB1, it might have a different CIP account just for using different funds. So there is definitely some overlap in the sense that if there's different funding mechanisms, we might have different CIP or NCIP accounts to track that. If you had a specific example, I might be able to give you a more specific answer.
Well, here's one that's right near my house, and this is the intersection at Herman Madison, Larkin, Via Del Rey. It's a 5-way intersection. It's right next to the high school. And I thought it was an NIP project, and that's to improve a very large intersection that is populated heavily at 8:30 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon. And it just keeps appearing on each one of these lists, but nothing happens.
So there is a CIP project for that intersection. Our city traffic engineering division received a grant to install some pop-up improvements or temporary improvements. We were trying to implement that through the on-call. So that has been an active project. When we got our quote, it was more expensive than we anticipated. So we're exploring different ways of delivering that. But that is a project, if you're looking at the CIP list, that's funded through a grant that we're still exploring how to deliver that.
So it was an NIP project, but now it's a CIP project?
I'll have to double check if it's still an NCIP project. I don't know off the top of my head. I know for sure there is a CIP project that's funded through a grant.
I guess the question is, should we expect to see some overlap between the CIP and the NCIP?
Yeah, you may see some overlap between the two programs. Just if there's different funding mechanisms, they could be tracked in different CIP or NCIP accounts.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Matthew. I don't mean to be too populist here, but the grand jury report on the wharf structure recently came out in the news, and I was wondering where do improvements to the wharf pier structures, where do those appear in the budget? Which would they be on this one or another one?
Don't. I can defer specifics on the project over to Andrew, but Wharf 2 repairs are included on this list, so they would be included in CIP, one of the CIP funding buckets.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. There's two CIP accounts set up for programmatic wharf improvements or repairs. So every 3 years, we try to do an assessment. We have a structural engineer go out to the wharfs, do an assessment, make recommendations for critical immediate maintenance repairs. And over the second and the third year, we try to implement those repairs and then have them come back out on the fourth year. So the programmatic wharf repairs are funded through those two CIP accounts.
Okay. So it's really an ongoing review and improvement process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Here. Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, Mike? I think the only question I have is that for some of the projects discussed, I mean, we see funding sources like Measure S and Measure P, but there's other projects in here which are large projects like rebuilding the wharves and the police station, fire station, the maintenance and big repairs on the tunnel. And what I don't see in here is revenue sources for any of that. And I'm hoping that as city staff comes up with the projects, they're also working diligently to come up with new sources of revenue for the city to pay for them. And I think that's really critical here. I think city council needs a list of new ways of bringing in revenue to pay for a lot of these projects that have been waiting for a long time to get done. And they're important projects. So I'm hopeful that when Hans and staff come to city council, maybe next week, there's going to be a list of new revenue sources that they're going to present for consideration to help pay for all these things in the CIP.
Yes, and Andrew can probably provide some more input on the status, the funding status for a lot of these projects, but just high level, I think part of the CIP is to, I would say, segment projects to get to, as you'll see, a lot of these are for information gathering, and then that leads to plans. And then once you have plans, you can apply for grants for funding sources for a lot of these projects. So it is kind of a step-by-step process, and the funding kind of comes along with it. But as far as what goes to council with the adoption of the CIP, I'll defer to Andrew as far as what the status is for funding for these projects included on this list.
Well, sure. So we have some restricted funds, some self-help funds like Measure PS, like those funds are specifically for roadway improvements, ADA upgrades, storm drains, and sidewalks. And it's great that we have like a sales tax measure that helps us do these maintenance repairs. For our facilities and our wharfs, you know, we obviously don't have the same sales tax measure, so we have to use general funds or other funding mechanisms, and those are usually a lot more competitive and highly sought after. So you make a fair point. I don't want to steal our finance department's thunder because I know the finance director will be presenting to city council next week on this exact topic. So we have more information to come, but you make a fair point that, you know, we definitely have a lot of needs, and you know, we may not necessarily have the same revenues for all these projects. So we are looking at different financing mechanisms, and our finance director will be presenting to council the next week or two.
Yeah, I think the important point is that for some of the taxes we're currently working on, they're either set asides like Measure S&P, or they're like the general fund, they're just already fully committed. And sales tax, we can't increase that. We're at the limit for that. So I think a big question that needs to be addressed is what additional revenue can the city look at obtaining to put towards these projects? And so I know that's not your particular part of the problem, it's finance, but maybe you can pass that along, that new sources of revenue should be assessed and put forward so they can make those tough decisions.
Can do.
Yes, any other questions or comments? Anybody in chambers? Anybody online, Erica?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, should we do a motion and a vote?
I'll make a motion that
Thank
we recommend to the city council that the CIP is consistent with the all the various plans identified here. I guess that's the motion.
Second? Second. Hey, Erica, we have a motion and a second. Could you do a roll call for us?
Sure. Chair Bluth,
Yes.
Vice Chair Silva,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
and Commissioner Latassa.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you. So any commissioner comments in general? Yep. Levi, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, just as noted in the report, just quick follow up from the May 6th City Council meeting. The council did consider and complete the second reading of the ordinance that would amend Chapter 38, our zoning code, to require new businesses and existing businesses changing type of use or location to obtain a zoning clearance permit. So that if you recall, that was the ordinance that came before this commission about a month or so ago. So they did adopt that under a second reading. So that'll go into effect 30 days from May 6th. So that'll be June 6th or June 5th, I believe. And then also noted here is the tentative agenda for our May 27th meeting. And we do have one item that is tentatively scheduled for that meeting, but we'll obviously keep you up to date if that changes. That's all.
Thank you.
So the change that the city council approved was that it could be either one. You could change the use or change the location, but you still have to apply.
That's correct. So if you change the use of your business and you're staying in the same location, you would, just like you'd have to obtain a new business license at
Okay.
that point, you would then have to also get a zoning clearance permit. And then vice versa, if you have an existing business and you're going to continue the same use, but in a different location that perhaps maybe has a different zoning, you would be required to obtain a new zoning clearance permit.
Great. Well, thanks. Let's end this meeting at 4:21.
Record time. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.